They say the human eye can't see spirits, but that night in Asaba, everyone saw something. Father Paul was on his way to the village for a missionary assignment when unknown gunmen ambushed him on the lonely bush road. They fired at him, close-range shots, non-stop, but the bullets didn't enter. Every single one fell to the ground like stones. The gunmen panicked, dropped their weapons, and ran into the forest in fear. But before we start this story, please like this video, subscribe, and share. Now, let's go back to how it all began.
Father Paul was known across the diocese as a rare kind of priest, humble in speech, fearless in spirit, and gifted with a strange grace that made people feel safe around him. He had served in 3 different parishes, each time leaving behind a trail of testimonies, families reconciled, sick people healed, youths delivered from addictions, and communities revived. Whenever trouble rose, people said, "Call Father Paul. His prayers shake the ground." So, when the bishop needed someone to send to Asaba village to liberate the children of God, a place every priest avoided, the choice was clear. The bishop chose to send Father Paul, due to his fearless spirit. But even Father Paul hesitated. For years he had heard the rumors about the village, how priests don't last there, how cursed the village is. That village swallows pastors and priests like water. Some said the last priest ran mad. Another died mysteriously. The most recent simply disappeared. Still, Father Paul accepted the assignment. His belief was simple. Where darkness is the loudest, light is needed the most. Few days later, he packed his bag, loaded in his 1969 Mercedes-Benz 220, and embarked on an impossible mission to Asaba. The road to Asaba was quiet, too quiet for comfort. Tall trees lined both sides of the narrow path as he drove. Twice, he thought he saw shadows crossing the road, but when he slowed down, nothing appeared. He kept praying under his breath and continued his journey. Then suddenly, 3 hefty men stepped out from the bush, with heavy guns and their faces covered. Father Paul's heart tightened, but he didn't stop. He increased the acceleration of the car. The men fired, loud, sharp gunshots that echoed through the forest road. The bullets struck him, but they did not enter. He felt each impact, like small stones hitting his body. One bullet hit his forehead and fell into his lap. He looked at it, flattened like it had collided with iron. The gunmen paused. One whispered, "Jesus Christ, wherein be this?" Another stumbled back, fear spreading across his masked face. Father Paul stared at them calmly, gripping his rosary. The men dropped their guns and bolted into the forest, running as if chased by something unseen. Father Paul breathed deeply. He wasn't hurt, not a scratch. Something or someone wanted him dead before he even reached Asaba. Who could this people be? Saved by the grace of God. Father John continued his journey and arrived at the entrance of the village just as the sun began to dip. Asaba village looked tired, worn out, abandoned by hope. Many houses were cracked, roofs sagging, farmlands dried up. The villagers watched him quietly as he walked, not with joy, not with relief, but with fear. A woman selling palm kernels muttered, "Another priest done come." A man beside her sighed, "He goes soon tire." Children stared from behind their mothers' wrappers, like they were seeing a ghost. The atmosphere was thick, like the air itself carried sorrow. Father Paul swallowed hard. The rumors were true. Asaba was no ordinary village. It was a battlefield waiting for the next casualty, and he had just walked into it. Father Paul moved slowly through the heart of Asaba, and with every step, the weight of the village settled heavier on his chest. It wasn't just poverty he saw, it was something deeper, something that looked like life had been drained from the land itself. Women sat outside their houses with dull, tired eyes, fanning themselves with broken pieces of cardboard. Most of them didn't greet him. They simply stared for a moment, then looked away quickly as if eye contact might invite trouble. A group of children ran past him, their ribs pushed sharply against their skin, their bellies swollen from hunger. One of them stumbled, and his mother rushed forward, pulling him close. "Don't go near the priest," she whispered harshly. "Do you want them to see you?" Them. The word clung to the air like smoke. Father Paul adjusted his collar and continued walking. His shoes kicked up reddish dust that settled instantly on the faded hems of his trousers. Everywhere he looked, something was dying. Abandoned kiosks with ripped umbrellas, dry wells long forgotten, farmlands covered in weeds. Even the breeze felt weak. Businesses were closed, not because there were no customers, but because people had stopped trying. A barber shop stood open, the ceiling fan spinning slowly with no electricity. An old man sat inside, sharpening scissors repeatedly, with no customer in sight. When he noticed Father Paul watching him, he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You are the new priest?" the old man asked, still sharpening. "Yes. I came to serve," he replied. The man nodded once, his hands trembling slightly. "God be with you, Father." Not, "Welcome," not, "We are happy you came," just, "God be with you," like a small prayer whispered over a man walking into fire. Farther down the road, a group of young men sat on a wooden bench under a mango tree. Their voices dropped the moment they saw him. One muttered, "How many times will they send people here?" Another shook his head, "He no go last. None of them does." A third added, "We warned them. That place, nobody enters and stays normal." Father Paul pretended he didn't hear them, but every word pierced him. By now he understood. Asaba was not merely suffering, it was imprisoned, bound by something unseen but felt by everyone. While he was still taking a walk around the village, saw an elderly woman sitting beside a calabash filled with herbs. Her eyes were clouded with age, but when she looked at him, something sharp sparked there. "You shouldn't have come, Father," she said softly. "This land, it rejects people like you." Paul stepped closer. "Why?" The woman lowered her gaze. "Because this village belongs to something older than all of us, and no priest sent here ever survives the fight." A shiver climbed his spine. The rumors were true. Asaba wasn't cursed by accident. It was owned, claimed, guarded by darkness, and he, alone, had been sent to break the chain and liberate the children of God from darkness, suffering, hunger, and fear of the unknown. 2 days after arriving at Asaba, Father Paul decided to visit the village parish where he was assigned to. It was so difficult for him to locate because no one wants to get involved with him or even look at his face. But luckily he got to meet a small boy who pointed him to the direction of the parish.
St. Columba's Catholic Church stood proudly at the far end of Asaba, its white walls shining in the late afternoon sun. From a distance, it looked like the only thing in the village untouched by suffering. Tall, beautiful, almost majestic.
If a stranger walked by, they would think it was a place filled with life, songs, and the warmth of worship. But Father Paul felt the truth long before he reached the doors. The air around the church was colder, heavier, as if the ground itself remembered things no one wanted to speak about. He climbed the steps slowly. His shoes echoed on the concrete, too loudly for an empty building. He reached for the handle, whispered a short prayer, and pushed the door open. A wave of stale, trapped air greeted him. Inside, the church was a shadow of what it once was. The pews were coated with dust. Cobwebs hung from the corners like abandoned decorations. The altar cloth was faded and torn. The candles beside the tabernacle were melted into shapeless lumps. It didn't look neglected. It looked abandoned in fear. Father Paul took a deep breath and walked further inside. His footsteps echoed sharply, bouncing off the walls. He felt eyes on him. Not human eyes, but something observing quietly from the unseen. Behind the altar stood a small wooden door leading to the vestry. He entered it cautiously. Old record books were stacked on a shelf, some covered in dust, others half-eaten by insects. He picked one up, brushed it gently, and opened it. His heart tightened. The pages held names of priests who had served before him, and the fates that met them. Reverend Father Santos died in his sleep. Reverend Father Emmanuel, mental breakdown, taken away by family. Reverend Father Jude, missing, body never found. Reverend Father Roland, fled after 3 weeks, refused to speak about what he saw. Paul sat down slowly, the book still open in his hands. Each name felt like a warning carved into time. These were not ordinary misfortunes. This was a pattern, a silent graveyard of men who carried God's name. He pulled out another record, then another, and another. Every story ended the same way: tragedy, madness, disappearance, or escape. As he read, he felt a sudden chill behind him, as though someone had entered the room. He turned quickly. Nothing. But the silence had changed. It was no longer empty. It was watching. Father Paul closed the last book and stood, his fingers trembling slightly. The truth settled on him like a heavy cloak. The battle for Asaba didn't start today. It had been raging for decades, and St. Columbus was not just a church, it was the epicenter, the place where darkness had planted its throne. Father Paul placed his hand on the altar and whispered, "Lord, whatever swallowed the others, it will not swallow me." He went outside, locked up the entrance to St. Columbus, and walked back to the rectory with the old record books still heavy in his mind. Evening had settled over Asaba, and the air carried that same uneasy stillness he had felt since he arrived. A few lanterns flickered in distant houses, but most windows remained dark, as if the villagers preferred to hide from the night. Inside the rectory, he set the books on a small wooden table and knelt to pray. He asked for strength, for guidance, for clarity. But the more he prayed, the more he felt something lurking outside, listening. When he finished, the village was completely silent. Too silent. He stood up, washed his face, and prepared to rest. But the moment he lay down, he heard sounds of things like someone was throwing some things inside. Someone was throwing stones at the windows.
Father Paul sat up immediately. The taps grew louder, faster, hitting the glass like small hands slapping it in desperation. He went to the window and drew the curtain aside. No one. Just darkness, thick and heavy, sitting on the compound like smoke. He closed the curtain and stepped back. Then he saw movement. Not from the window, from the doorway. A shadow slid across the wall, long and thin, stretching like a hand reaching for him. Father Paul froze. The room suddenly felt colder, his breath turning faintly white. He whispered, "In the name of Jesus." Before he could finish, a voice called his name from outside. "Father Paul?" Long, drawn out, mocking. Another voice joined it, then another. Different tones, different distances, all calling him from all directions at once. "Father Paul? Father, come out. We are waiting." His heart pounded, but he refused to move. As he backed away from the door, an invisible force pushed against it from outside, not knocking, but pressing, as if someone was leaning their full weight on the wood, trying to break in. The hinges groaned. Father Paul felt the air change behind him, suddenly tight, heavy. Before he could turn, something unseen pressed against his chest, hard. His breath caught. He staggered and grabbed the table for balance. The pressure grew stronger, pushing him toward the floor. It felt like a boulder sitting on his lungs, crushing him inch by inch. For a moment, panic clawed at him, but then he remembered something. Darkness expected fear, not resistance. He forced his eyes open, placed a trembling hand over his chest, and began to pray. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steady, firm, like a man who knew who walked beside him. "As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil." The pressure faltered. He kept praying, "For you are with me." A sharp hiss filled the room. The shadows on the wall twisted violently and vanished. The voices outside stopped. The stones stopped. Even the wind died, leaving the night strangely empty. Father Paul stood alone, sweating, heart racing, but unbroken. The evil in Asaba had expected him to cower. Instead, it had found a man who prayed even when he couldn't breathe. He prayed that night for an hour, recited Gregorian chants, and slept off. Father Paul woke the next morning with the memory of the night pressing on him like a shadow he could not shake. The air in the rectory felt heavy still, as if it remembered the struggle, as if something unseen had lingered long after the attacks ceased. He knelt beside the small wooden bed and whispered a prayer of protection, asking for strength, wisdom, and courage. Today, he told himself, he would meet the true face of the darkness in Asaba. He had heard whispers from villagers before, hints of secret power hiding behind smiles and holy gestures, but he had yet to see it with his own eyes. That morning, Father Paul made his way to the edge of the village, to a compound the locals dared not approach. There, behind tall, rusting gates and thick, gnarled trees, lived the elders who pulled the strings of Asaba's misfortune. They called themselves the Council of Nine. Publicly, they were revered, the front row at every mass, Bibles clutched tightly, solemn faces bowed in pious devotion. Their homes were tidy, their gardens cared for, their children educated outside the village. They wore respectability like armor. Privately, the truth was far darker. Father Paul watched from the shadows as the council gathered in the dim interior of their meeting hall. Candles flickered, casting long, trembling shadows on walls covered in ancient symbols. He saw them preparing rituals that chilled his blood. Bowls filled with herbs, strange powders, and red liquids sat on a low table. The air was thick with incense he had never smelled in any church, a smoke that seemed alive, whispering threats to the soul. He saw the methods they used to control Asaba, a curse whispered over crops, leaving the fields barren. Fear planted in every home, keeping families silent and obedient. Food offered to priests, laced with unseen poisons that destroyed the spirit. Beautiful women, innocent in appearance, sent to tempt and trap the holy. Even hired gunmen, ready to strike anyone who resisted their grip. Father Paul understood in that moment, this council had turned faith into a weapon. Every priest who had failed here had been carefully, deliberately destroyed. Disease, accidents, despair, all orchestrated by these 9 shadows sitting behind holy facades. And now they had marked him. The elders leaned in, speaking in low voices, voices that carried menace and calculation. They spoke of Father Paul as if he were already dead, a sacrifice to their invisible kingdom of darkness. They laughed quietly at his persistence, mocking the very prayers he offered. Father Paul felt a weight in his chest, not from fear, but from the awareness of what awaited him. He could see their strategy. First, they would attempt subtle corruption, gifts, flattery, feigned friendship. Then intimidation, spiritual attacks, and if all failed else, violence. He breathed slowly, steadying his resolve. The Council of 9 could try to break him, as they had broken the priests before him. But one thing they could not see, one thing they could not touch, was the power that walked with him. Father Paul whispered, almost to himself, "The Lord who preserved me on the road will not abandon me now." Father Paul returned to the rectory after a long morning, his thoughts heavy with what he had seen of the Council of 9. He knew their reach extended far beyond the streets of Asaba. Their eyes, even when hidden behind smiles and bowed heads, seemed to follow him everywhere. That evening, a soft knock echoed through the rectory. "Come in," he called calmly, though his spirit was alert. The door opened, revealing a group of older women carrying baskets overflowing with yams, vegetables, rice, and ripe fruits. Their smiles were wide, voices sweet as they greeted him. "Father, welcome to Asaba. Please, accept our gifts," one said, her tone honeyed, almost reverent. Father Paul took the baskets, bowing slightly, his hands steady. "Thank you. May God bless you all," he replied. But something inside him stirred, a subtle warning, a voice in his spirit, whispering, "Be careful. Do not touch what they offer." He set the baskets on his table, lifted the lids, inhaled the aromas, but did not take a single bite. Instead, he murmured a silent prayer over each item, consecrating it in the name of God. Nothing happened. He left the food untouched, returning to his small kitchen to prepare his own simple meal from the local market. The elders watched through hidden eyes. Their first plan had failed. The priest had discerned the poison they had hidden, both in food and in intent. When subtlety failed, the council turned to seduction. That same evening, a young woman named Queen was sent to the rectory. She walked in, her steps slow, deliberate, rehearsed. Her dress was neat, her eyes wide and innocent, the perfect mask for the trap she carried. "Good evening, Father," she said softly, voice trembling yet coaxing. "I brought some things and wanted to speak with you." Father Paul observed quietly. Not her eyes, not her gestures, but the weight around her spirit. He recognized the chains holding her, fear, coercion, manipulation, spiritual bondage. Her mission was clear: to entangle him, to distract, to corrupt the light he carried into Asaba. "Queen," he said gently, "you do not need to carry this burden. These chains are not yours. God has not sent you here to harm, but to be freed." Tears welled in her eyes. She faltered, words trembling on her lips. He placed a hand over her bowed head and prayed aloud. Not a harsh reprimand, not anger, but a prayer of release, of mercy. He called on God to break every hold the council had over her life. A subtle shift passed over her, a weight lifting, a light returning to her gaze. Queen sank to her knees, sobbing softly, no longer an instrument of darkness, but a soul reborn. From that night on, she would become Father Paul's secret ally. Through her, the hidden truths of the council would eventually surface. Through her, Asaba would begin to see the first glimmers of hope.
Father Paul watched her go, eyes calm, heart firm. The battle was intensifying. The council had tried their tricks and failed, but this was only the beginning. He knew the darkness would escalate. He also knew one thing with absolute certainty. Asaba had just met a priest who could not be broken. And the chains holding this village were about to face their first real challenge. The night was heavy with silence in Asaba, the kind that presses on the chest and whispers of unseen eyes. Father Paul sat alone in his small room at the rectory, the flickering candle casting shadows across the cracked walls. He had prayed, counseled, and discerned much, yet the weight of the village's darkness pressed on him more than ever. As he bowed his head over the worn pages of his Bible, a sudden stillness fell, deeper than any night he had known. His eyelids grew heavy, and a vision overtook him, not of sleep, but of a divine encounter. He saw the village of Asaba as it truly was, unseen by human eyes. Thick chains of shadow coiled around the streets, wrapping houses, markets, and even St. Columbus itself. He watched these chains twist and tighten around the people, draining hope, joy, and faith. The children's laughter was stifled before it could begin. Mothers prayed silently in empty homes. Farmers tilled barren soil, the earth refusing to yield. Then the vision shifted, and he saw the Council of Nine standing together beneath a dark altar inside St. Columbus. Candles burned black, and symbols of blood marked the floor. He realized this was a covenant older than memory, a binding pact sealed in secrecy. Priests who had come before him, so many, had fallen because of this hidden blood oath. Father Paul trembled slightly, but his fear did not take root. In his vision, he also saw the souls of Asaba, twisted and bound, but not beyond redemption. The chains could be broken, if only he prepared himself fully. The Lord's voice whispered, not with thunder, but with calm authority. Go to Sugbi, pray, fast, prepare, for the hour of confrontation is near. I will reveal the truth to you, and through you, this village will be set free. He awoke with his body drenched with sweat, heart racing, yet strangely steady in faith. Dawn had not yet broken, and the cool air of the early morning brushed against his face as he knelt beside his bed. By first light, he had packed a small bag. Bread, water, a Bible, and nothing more. He called for Collins, his faithful aide, who was already sweeping the compound quietly. Collins, he said softly, hand resting on his young man's shoulder. I must go to Sugbi. Pray for me, and tell no one where I am going. Collins's eyes widened, worry clouding his face. But Father, what about the parish? Trust the Lord, Father Paul replied, with calm authority. This is necessary. Everything we face in Asaba will be revealed there. The chains must be broken.
The journey to the monastery was quiet, the road lined with dry trees and dust stirred by the early morning wind. When he arrived, the stone chapel stood among thick foliage, its walls weathered but strong, untouched by the evil pressing down on Asaba. He entered, locked the door, and laid aside all worldly concerns. For 3 days, he ate nothing, drank sparingly, and prayed without ceasing. Psalms filled the cold air, his voice rough and raw from hours of devotion. He wept for the children, for the sick, for the priests who had fallen before him. On the 3rd night, as the candles burned low and the wind whispered through the trees, a deep, unwavering peace descended upon him. The vision returned, but now it was different. The chains were still visible, yes, but the Lord's light shone along their links. They could be broken. Father Paul rose, body trembling from fasting, but spirit fortified like iron. At dawn, he packed his few belongings, breathed in the cool air, and stepped onto the path back to Asaba. This time, he would not come alone in faith. He carried the authority of God with him. The final confrontation was near, and the darkness of the Council of Nine would soon meet the fire they could not withstand. The morning sun rose over Asaba like a promise, pale and trembling through the heavy mist. Father Paul's old Mercedes rumbled into the village, kicking up clouds of red dust that drifted over empty streets and shuttered stalls. Word had already begun to spread. The priest has returned. Some whispered hope, others fear. He stepped from the car, cassock swaying with each deliberate movement, eyes calm yet burning with purpose. Nedu and Queen followed quietly behind him, their faces solemn but resolute. Inside St. Columbus, the air had changed. Dust motes danced in the pale light streaming through cracked windows, but there was an unmistakable weight, a sense of expectancy, as if the walls themselves waited. The congregation trickled in slowly. Families who had abandoned faith returned hesitantly, drawn by curiosity or a faint hope that had long been buried. Children clutched their mothers' hands. Elders shifted nervously in the front pews, hiding gilts of glints and dread. The Council of Nine, regal and composed in public, sat where they always did, their eyes cold and calculating. But today, something had shifted. Father Paul climbed the creaking steps to the pulpit, his voice steady, carrying authority that filled every corner of the church. Today, God will expose every darkness that has held this village captive. Every lie, every curse, every hidden evil will be revealed. The ground beneath them trembled slightly. Windows rattled, candles flickered violently, and a cold wind swept through the sanctuary. Murmurs ran through the crowd like a river of fear and awe.
Father Paul's eyes locked on the council. You, who have ruled through fear, who have bound the innocent and cursed the faithful, the Lord sees all. Today, your covenant is broken. Mama Ajima's hands clenched the pew before her. Mama Agatha's face paled. Adeli's knees buckled. Chewy's fingers twitched nervously against the altar rail. Papa Chinidu's white beard seemed to tremble as he whispered prayers that could not save him. Then it began. Flames of light, invisible to the eyes but felt in every bone, pressed down upon the council. Their shouts pierced the air, first sharp, then raw with terror. "Confess! Confess what you have done!" Father Paul commanded. One by one, their voices spilled secrets like a torrent. We cursed the children. We sent gunmen to kill the priests. We poisoned the food. We bound this village with our rituals. The congregation gasped, some recoiling, others weeping.
Rage and horror mingled as the truth washed over every person present. But Father Paul raised his hands, voice thundering, "Stop! The Lord is merciful. If you truly repent, He will forgive you." Silence fell like a shroud. The elders collapsed, tears streaming, dust and ashes mingling with their once proud robes. Their proud faces, once masks of holiness, were humbled in broken confession. The covenant that had chained Asaba for decades shattered like glass. Outside, the first drops of rain in years tapped against the tin roof. It grew heavier, washing the red dust from the streets, soaking the parched earth and filling every dry riverbed. Families stepped outside, lifting their faces to the sky, laughter mingling with tears. Children ran barefoot through puddles, laughing for the first time in memory, their joy echoing off walls that had once seemed so heavy with gloom. Business stalls that had been abandoned reopened. Merchants unpacked long-forgotten wares, and the scent of fresh food and ripe fruit filled the air. Families reunited at doorways, embracing loved ones they had not seen for years, their hearts lighter, their eyes brighter. Everywhere you looked there was movement, life, and a sense of cautious hope. Inside St. Columba's Catholic Church, the transformation was just as profound. The once dusty pews now groaned under the weight of worshippers, voices rising together in song and prayer. The sunlight streaming through cracked windows caught on polished floors and newly cleaned walls, illuminating the altar that had for so long seemed like a shadowed relic. And at the very center, Father Paul stood, his hands raised in quiet reverence, tears streaming down his face. He looked out at the congregation, seeing faces full of renewed faith and courage. The Council of Nine, humbled and repentant, knelt with the others, stripped of their pride, yet included in the mercy that Father Paul had preached. The chains that had bound this village, curses, fear, and deceit, had been shattered, replaced with the power and grace of God. Walking slowly down the aisles, Father Paul greeted the people, blessing children and elders alike. Each handshake, each word of encouragement carried the weight of hope and renewal. Stories of those who had fled began to return as people heard the news. Asaba was alive again, free from the darkness that had long held it hostage. Outside, the rain continued, soaking parched fields and turning dusty paths into rivers of life. Crops that had withered under years of neglect began to revive. Gardens bloomed, trees lifted their branches as if reaching for the sky, and birds returned, filling the air with song. The village was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of abundance, community, and restored dignity. Father Paul returned to the altar, kneeling in the quiet of the church. His tears were not of sorrow, but of gratitude. He whispered a prayer, lifting his eyes to the ceiling. "Thank you, Lord, for restoring this land, for saving this people, for turning darkness into light." And in that moment, Asaba exhaled a long, cleansing breath. The sun broke through the clouds, scattering golden light across the village, glinting off puddles, rooftops, and newly blossoming flowers. It was a new dawn, not just of day, but of life, faith, and hope. The story of Asaba would be told for generations, not as a tale of despair, but as a testament to courage, prayer, and the unyielding power of God working through one faithful servant. Father Paul stood slowly at the altar, arms raised, voice trembling with awe. "To God be all the glory,
Forever, this village is his. And with that, Asaba began to live again.
The village of Asaba was no longer a village chained by fear, poverty, or darkness. What had once been a place where hope was crushed and prayers went unanswered had been transformed by courage, faith, and divine intervention. Father Paul's journey, from the ambush on the dusty road to standing strong at the altar, was more than the story of one priest. It was the story of a village, a community, and countless lives restored. The elders who once ruled through fear were humbled. The children who had known only hunger now laughed freely. Families reunited, crops thrived, and St. Columba's Catholic Church, once silent and abandoned, now overflowed with song, prayer, and life. This story reminds us that darkness can never stand against faith, courage, and the will to act for good. Even in the most hopeless places, light can return. And sometimes, all it takes is one determined heart to change everything. As the rain fell over Asaba, washing the streets, filling the wells, and nurturing the land, one truth became clear. When God moves through someone willing to serve, no curse, no fear, no darkness can prevail. Father Paul looked over the village he had come to serve, tears in his eyes and gratitude in his heart. "To God be all the glory," he whispered, knowing that the story of Asaba was now a story of hope, one that would never be forgotten.